This is lesson 9.1c, vertex and general forms. Our essential question today: how do I use quadratic functions to model and solve equations based on time and height relationship for projectiles? How do I solve quadratic equations using graph, tables, and symbolic methods? How do I describe real-world meanings related to quadratic models? So vertex form: y equals plus or minus a times x plus or minus h squared plus or minus k. If we have a negative out front of the a value, it flips the graph over the x-axis. If a is greater than 1, it's a stretch. If a is less than 1, it's a shrink. Plus h tells us how many to go left. Minus h tells us how many to go right. Plus k tells us to go up that many. Minus k tells us how many to go down. Why would we use vertex form? It helps us to be able to graph pretty easily, and then we also know what the vertex is, and it's also easy to perform transformations. What is general form? Starts out with y equals a x squared plus b x plus c. The a out front in general form also causes a stretch or a shrink, but it's specifically related to projectile motion. So a is the pull of gravity. If it's meters, it's negative 4.9. If it's feet, it's negative 16. B is the initial velocity, which is like our speed. And c is the starting height, or initial height. Example A, determine the following. So in this first equation, we have y equals 3 times x minus 8 squared minus 7. This is in vertex form, so we're going to use this equation up here. The 3 out front is in the spot where this a is, so that tells us it's a stretch or a shrink. 3 is bigger than 1, so it's a stretch of 3. Next we have x minus 8, which is right here, and it's a minus 8. So I look for the minus, so that tells me it goes right 8. Next we have this minus 7 on the outside, which is right here. Minus, if we look, tells us we go down, so I'm going to go down 7. We still need to figure out if it was flipped or not. If we look right here, if there's a negative out front, it flips. And in ours, we do not have a negative out front, so it is not flipped. The vertex is hk, and when we write what the h is, we are going to write the opposite of what we see. So over here, it's a negative 8, so I'm going to write positive 8. And then the k is just whatever we see. Over here, it's a negative 7, so I'm going to write negative 7. So that's our vertex, 8, negative 7. Alright, next one. We have a negative out front right here. A negative out front tells us that we flip it. So it is flipped. We will write yes. This 4.9 out front is where the a value is. I do not look at the negative when I'm determining a. I just look at 4.9. 4.9 is bigger than 1, so it is a stretch of 4.9. X minus 2 right here. So I look right here. Minus is over here, which tells me it goes right that many, so right 2. Plus 45 on the outside is over here. The plus tells us we go up, so up 45. Next, we just need to do the vertex, so we look inside, we see minus 2, but we're going to write plus 2, so positive 2, positive 45. Next one, we have 0.25 out front. That is where the a value is, and 0.25 is less than 1. So it is a shrink of 0.25. X plus 1 on the inside. So I go over here, plus 1. That tells us it's left 1. Minus 9 on the outside. Over here. The minus tells us down 9. To see if it's flipped, we'd need to have a negative out front of our a. So in this one, there's no negative, it's positive. So is it flipped? No. Now we write our vertex. It's a plus 1, so I write minus 1. Then leave this alone, minus 9. So negative 1, negative 9 is our vertex. For these next few, they are in general form, so we will be using this equation up here to answer the questions. So right away I see negative 16, which if I look, I wrote right here, negative 16 feet. The question is it in feet or meters? So we will write feet. Next it says starting velocity or speed, which is what's in the middle here. So where it has just an x is what we're looking for. So 10 has just an x, so the starting velocity or speed would be 10 feet per second. And then to find starting height, that's over here, that's the last part that doesn't have an x at all. So if we look, we have 45, it's in feet, so our starting height, 45 feet. Alright, next one, negative 4.9. You look up here, I wrote negative 4.9 meters. So this problem is in meters. Next, we need the starting velocity or speed, which is with just the x, which is right here, so 32 meters per second. And then last, we have the starting height, which is at the end here. It does not have an x by it at all. So in this one, it would be 1.2 meters. Alright, next one. To determine feet or meters, we have negative 16 here. Negative 16 tells us it is in feet. Alright, starting velocity or speed is the next one. It has just an x by it, so that would be 55 feet per second. And then last, we look for our starting height, which is at the end with no x by it at all, which if we look, it's missing right here. So actually that is plus 0, which means our starting height is also 0 feet. Feet or meters, we look for what we're given. We have negative 4.9, which tells us meters. Then for the initial velocity or speed, we're looking for the one that just has an x, which if we look at this one here, we have x squared and we have no x. We don't have that 0x there, so I can actually rewrite that equation over here. So negative 49x squared plus 0x plus 130 tells us the initial velocity was 0 meters per second. And then starting height is at the end. There's no x by it at all, so that'd be 130 meters. Now for example B, we have to write the equations. This first group has feet or meters, initial velocity, and starting height, which tells us we should use general form. Alright, so feet or meters comes first, so y equals, it says feet, which tells us negative 16 x squared, initial velocity of 10, so plus 10 x, and starting height of 4, so plus 4. Alright, next one, meters tells us negative 4.9, so y equals negative 4.9 x squared, initial velocity of 15, so plus 15 x, and starting height of 7, so plus 7. Alright, next one, y equals, feet tells us negative 16 x squared, initial velocity of 50, so plus 50 x, starting height of 25, so plus 25. Last one, y equals, meters tells us negative 4.9 x squared, initial velocity of 0, so we can write plus 0x, or you could just leave that part out, and then starting height of 50, so plus 50. Alright, these next examples all are saying the transformations left, right, up, down, flip, stretch, shrink, and it has the word vertex, which tells us we want to use vertex form. So I went ahead and wrote it out for us. First it says left or right, which if you remember, it looks like this. So it's like backwards from what you would think. It says left 4, so that's going to end up being a plus 4. But when we start this out, we should see if there's a flip, because that's the first part. Right here, if it has a negative out front. So let's see. It flipped, it said yes, so we do want to put a negative. So negative. And then next comes the a value, which is our stretch or shrink. They said 16, so we can write 16. And then x, and it said left 4, which we decided meant it needs to be a plus in order to go this direction. So we're going to write plus 4. And then throw a little squared on there, so it makes it a quadratic. And then last would be if it went up or down at all, which up or down is just like we think it would be, plus or minus. And let's see, it went down 2, so that should be a minus 2. And we have the first one done. Next one, let's just go ahead and start with if there's a negative out front, which if we look at the flip, it says no, so there's no negative. So next we move on to the a value, which is our stretch or shrink, which is 2, so we can go ahead and write 2. And then x, and then let's see, it says it, so this goes next, plus or minus h, which is if it goes left or right. It says right 2, so to go to the right this way, I need to do a minus 2. And then parentheses, don't forget the little squared, super important. And then lastly, we just have, if it goes up or down at all, let's see, so up or down, that's this part, it says up or down here, so down 8, which is just minus 8. Alright, next one, let's start out, see if it's got a flipped. If we look, flip, it says yes, so we do want to have the negative out front. So negative, then we look at the a value, so which is our stretch or shrink, stretch of 4.9, so we can write that in. And then x, and then next would be plus or minus h, so left or right. It says no, so that means it doesn't go left, it doesn't go right. So that's really like putting a plus 0 in there. But I don't feel like writing that, so I'm just going to put x squared. That's the same thing. After that, we have a plus or minus k, which it says up 1. To go up, we need a plus. So plus 1. And that one's done. Last one like this, start off with y equals. Let's see if it has a flip. It says no, so there's no negative out front. And so we can move on to the stretch factor, stretch or shrink, it says 7, so it's a stretch of 7. And then x, now we look to see plus or minus h, which tells us left or right. It says left 7, so in order to go this way, left, I need a plus 7. So plus 7 will make it go left, 7. Don't forget the squared, that's super important. Then we look to see plus or minus k to go up or down. Up or down, it just says no, so that means it doesn't go up or down at all, so that's really like a plus 0 here, which we can just leave blank. Alright, so for example C, we're just going to do this second one here. 3 times x minus 4 squared plus 7 equals 55. Draw a line, and remember, this is the jail. We gotta bust our prisoner friends out of the jail by taking out one guard at a time. I'm going to start by getting rid of a plus 7, so I subtract 7 on both sides, and then I can rewrite what I have, so 3 times x minus 4 squared equals 48. So I'm working my way from the outside in. Remember, when you are solving for a variable, you do the order of operations backwards. That's why I've got rid of the addition first. And this x minus 4 is inside the parentheses, so that's like the last thing I'm going to worry about. I do see that I have times by 3, so to undo that, I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And then write what I have left. X minus 4 squared equals 16. So now, if we look, we almost have the jail by itself. Our prisoner friends cannot escape yet because we have to get rid of that little 2. To get rid of the little 2, squaring, we do the square root, but we have to do it on both sides. That gets rid of the little 2, and now we think, what number times itself gives us 16? That would be 4 and negative 4, so let's just make a note of that. So now that the little 2 is gone, our prisoner friends escape and they run in 2 directions. X minus 4 equals, x minus 4 equals, and then what I wrote over here. So 4 and negative 4. And then we finish solving. I add 4 to both sides. and x equals 8. And over here, I add 4 to both sides, and x equals 0. So when we're solving quadratic functions, we have to remember that it's very likely that we get two different answers. And this concludes lesson 9.1c.